First contact and confusion. The research vessel Curiosity drifted through the Kuiper Belt's outer reaches, its sensors probing the darkness for any signs of extrasolar objects. Dr. Sarah Martinez stood at her station, reviewing the latest data streams when something unprecedented appeared on her screens. The signal was unlike anything she'd ever seen before, a perfect geometric pattern repeating with mathematical precision. "Captain Rodriguez," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "You need to see this." Captain Elena Rodriguez made her way to the science station, her weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the holographic displays. The Curiosity was a small vessel, barely 300 meters long, with a crew of just 25. They weren't meant for first contact. They were astronomers, physicists, and debris analysts studying the solar system's edge. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Rodriguez asked, squinting at the complex pattern. "It's artificial," Martins replied. "The signal contains embedded mathematical constants, pi, e, the golden ratio, but arranged in a way that suggests it's not just a beacon. It's more like..." "Like what?" "Like a traffic signal." Martinez finished, her voice filled with wonder. Before Rodriguez could respond, the ship's AI chimed in. "Captain, multiple objects approaching at relativistic speeds. Configuration suggests artificial construction." The bridge crew froze as sleek vessels emerged from what appeared to be holes in space itself. They were beautiful in their symmetry, their hulls covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The largest was easily 20 times the size of the Curiosity. "Open all frequencies," Rodriguez ordered, falling back on first contact protocols that had been theoretical until now. "This is the Earth research vessel Curiosity. We come in peace and seek peaceful communication." The response came almost immediately, in perfect English. "Attention unauthorized vessel. You have entered restricted space without properly filed flight plans or species classification documentation. Please prepare for immediate boarding and regulatory assessment." Rodriguez blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your vessel lacks the required Form C-1135X for unclassified species transit through regulated space. This is a Class 3 violation of the Galactic Confederation's transit ordinances. Please power down your engines and prepare for boarding." The bridge crew exchanged confused looks. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. There should be tension, wonder, perhaps even fear, not bureaucratic citations. "We were unaware of any regulations," Rodriguez replied carefully. "We are an exploration vessel from Earth, making our first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Perhaps we could discuss this situation more." Ignorance of regulations does not constitute exemption from their enforcement. The alien voice interrupted. "Your species' lack of proper registration forms is noted but does not excuse the violation. Please stand by for temporary species classification and regulatory introduction package." A massive data stream suddenly flooded the Curiosity's computers. The ship's AI began sorting through it, displaying summary after summary on the main screen. There were forms for everything: species classification requests, technological assessment applications, cultural development reports, and thousands more. "Captain," the AI reported, "I'm counting over 50,000 distinct regulatory documents, each requiring multiple submissions and approval processes. The shortest appears to be 300 pages long." Martinez couldn't help but laugh. "We've spent centuries wondering if we were alone in the universe, dreaming of advanced civilizations among the stars. And when we finally make contact, they're bureaucrats." Rodriguez felt a smile tugging at her lips despite the situation. "Well, Doctor, you wanted to study something unprecedented." The alien voice continued, seemingly oblivious to the human's reaction. "As an unregistered species, you will be assigned a temporary classification pending full review. Please note that the review process typically takes between 3 and 5 standard galactic years. During this period, your species will be restricted to your solar system unless granted special transit permits, which can be applied for using Form T2756B, subsection 47. Captain. Martinez interrupted, studying her readings. Their ships, they're incredibly advanced, but they're following exactly the same patrol pattern described in their regulatory documents. They haven't deviated by even a millimeter. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting these incredibly advanced aliens are predictable? Predictable doesn't begin to cover it. They're literally following their own rulebook to the letter. No adaptation, no tactical considerations, just pure procedure. The captain leaned back in her chair, a gleam in her eye that her crew had learned to recognize. Well then, Doctor, I believe humanity's first galactic incident report is about to get very interesting. Let's show our new friends why humans have a reputation for thinking outside the box. As the alien vessels moved to surround the Curiosity in their precisely calculated pattern, none of them seemed to notice the small probe the humans had already launched. A probe carrying copies of everything they were learning about this new galactic civilization, headed straight back to Earth at maximum speed. The galaxy might run on paperwork, but humanity was about to introduce a little chaos into the system. The paperwork empire. 3 months after humanity's first contact with the Galactic Confederation, the United Earth government's newly established Extraterrestrial Relations Office was drowning in paperwork. Literal paperwork. The Confederation insisted on physical copies of all documents, printed on a specific type of mineral-infused material that had taken Earth's scientists weeks to replicate. Dr. James Chen, Earth's appointed Chief Regulatory Compliance Officer, stared at the towering stacks of forms covering every surface in his office. His assistant, Maya Patel, entered with yet another hovercart loaded with documents. The Confederation's Central Processing Division just sent their response to our species classification appeal, Maya said, lifting a bound volume nearly as thick as her arm. They rejected it because we used blue ink instead of purple-blue ink on page 2471. James dropped his head into his hands. Of course they did. Did they at least send the correct ink specification this time? Yes, but we need to file Form X591 to receive permission to use it, and we can't file that form until we have a proper species classification, which we can't get without the appeal that requires the ink. That makes absolutely no sense. Maya smiled. Actually, I think I'm starting to understand their system. It's not meant to make sense. It's meant to maintain the status quo. The Confederation has been running things the same way for so long that the procedures have become more important than their purpose. James looked up at his assistant. In the chaos following first contact, Maya had proven invaluable, her background in game theory and systems analysis, helping them navigate the labyrinthine processes of galactic bureaucracy. The Curiosity's encounter proved they're technologically far ahead of us, James mused. But they're so bound by their own rules that they can barely function. Did you see the report from the Cultural Exchange team? Maya nodded. The one about the Confederation species being genuinely confused by human entertainment. Apparently, they can't understand why we would deliberately introduce uncertainty and challenges into our recreational activities. Exactly. They've optimized themselves into stagnation. Everything has to be predictable, categorized, and properly filed in triplicate. James stood up and walked to the window overlooking New Geneva's skyline, where the Confederation's embassy tower rose like a perfect geometric crystal among the more varied human architecture. We've also received an interesting report from Dr. Martinez, Maya said, pulling up a holographic display. The Curiosity's science team has been analyzing the Confederation's technology. While their base tech level is far beyond ours, they haven't innovated in centuries. They're using the exact same designs documented in their oldest regulatory archives. James turned back to his assistant. Because innovation would require new forms, new procedures, new classifications. And nobody wants to do the paperwork. Maya finished with a grin. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember that workaround we found for the communication protocols last month? The one where we classified text messages as micro-documents to bypass the formal communication requirements. What about it? 3 younger Confederation species have already adopted it. The Confederation's Communication Regulatory Board is in chaos because there's no procedure for handling procedural innovations. James felt a smile spreading across his face. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That may be humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization, will be teaching them how to break their own rules. Maya's eyes sparkled with mischief. I've already drafted a proposal. We're calling it the Administrative Innovation Initiative. Let me guess, you found a way to classify it under existing regulations. Better. I found 17 different ways to classify it. They're so confused by the multiple simultaneous filings that they've created a special committee just to determine which forms we should have used. James laughed. And while they're busy trying to figure that out, we'll be implementing changes faster than they can create regulations to control them. The best part, according to their own rules, they can't stop us from following their procedures, even if we're following them in ways they never intended. A light flashed on Maya's communicator. Oh, and the latest update from the Cultural Exchange team. Apparently some of the younger Confederation diplomats have discovered human music. They're particularly fascinated by jazz. Jazz? James raised an eyebrow. Think about it. An art form based on structured improvisation. It's completely alien to their way of thinking, but it follows rules while breaking them. They can't decide if it should be classified as a violation of musical regulations or a new form of mathematical expression. James looked back at the stacks of paperwork covering his office. You know, when we dreamed of joining a galactic civilization, nobody imagined we'd be revolutionizing it with bureaucratic loopholes and jazz. That's because everyone else in the galaxy forgot something important, Maya said, already starting to sort through the new documents with practiced efficiency. Sometimes the best way to change a system is to follow its rules so enthusiastically that it breaks under its own weight. As if to emphasize her point, another hovercart of forms floated into the office, this one bearing the distinct markings of the Confederation's Emergency Response Division. James caught a glimpse of the top document's title, Preliminary Analysis of Human Administrative Methodologies and Their Impact on Established Regulatory Frameworks. They're trying to regulate our way of handling their regulations, he chuckled. Want to show them how many different ways we can file our response. Maya was already pulling up the relevant forms on her tablet. I've got 12 different departments we can submit it to simultaneously. Should we use blue ink, purple blue ink, or both? Both, James decided. After all, there's no specific regulation against using multiple approved ink colors in the same document. At least, not yet. The game was on, and humanity was just getting started. Human innovation strikes back. The Galactic Confederation's annual regulatory review conference was in chaos, and first speaker Enxithalax couldn't believe it was all because of a species that hadn't even achieved proper classification status yet. What do you mean they submitted the same proposal through 23 different departments? The first speaker's crystalline head ridges flickered with agitation as they addressed the Committee for Procedural Oversight. Administrator Venkar, their scales shifting to a nervous pale blue, consulted their datapad. The humans found that their Administrative Innovation Initiative qualified under multiple categorical definitions. According to Confederation regulations, all valid submission paths must be processed independently. But that's creating unprecedented procedural loops. We have departments arguing over jurisdiction, forms being processed in parallel, and some species are actually requesting permission to submit their own proposals in multiple categories. Technically, Venkar added, their voice dropping to a whisper, there's nothing in the regulations that prohibits this approach. The conference chamber, a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate representatives from over 10,000 species, was filled with the buzz of conversation and the occasional sound of regulatory datapads being dropped in shock. On the main display, a holographic chart showed the exponential increase in cross-departmental filing activities over the past 6 months. In the observation gallery, Dr. Sarah Martinez, now Earth's chief science liaison to the Confederation, watched the proceedings with barely concealed amusement. Beside her, her Confederation counterpart, senior researcher Zix, was studying a contraband jazz recording with intense concentration. "I still don't understand," Zix said, their neural tendrils twitching in confusion. "These musicians, they're following the musical structure while simultaneously deviating from it. How can something be ordered and chaotic at the same time?" Sarah smiled. "That's kind of our specialty. We call it structured creativity, like how we've been handling your regulatory system. But the regulations are meant to create order, to ensure everything proceeds according to established protocols." Zix's tendrils were now fully extended, a sign of extreme agitation or excitement. Sarah wasn't quite sure which. "And we are following the protocols," Sarah pointed out. "We're just following all of them at once, in ways nobody expected. Like jazz, there are rules about harmony, rhythm, and structure, but within those rules, there's room for infinite variation." Below them, the conference had devolved into multiple heated discussions. A group of younger species representatives were openly taking notes on human submission techniques, while the more established members of the Confederation were trying desperately to find regulations to prevent regulations from being followed too enthusiastically. "Did you know," Sarah continued, "that Earth's Internet, our first global information network, evolved largely through people finding creative ways to use it that its creators never imagined? The best innovations often come from using existing systems in new ways." Zix was silent for a moment, their neural tendrils swaying gently. "Yesterday, I submitted my research proposal using 3 different classification protocols simultaneously. The review board is still trying to decide which one takes precedence." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And how does that make you feel?" "Terrified," Zix admitted. "Exhilarated. I've been a researcher for 300 cycles, and this is the first time I've done anything that wasn't explicitly covered by existing procedures." They paused. "Is this what it's like to be human?" "Welcome to the dark side," Sarah grinned. "We have jazz." The chamber below erupted in fresh chaos as someone discovered that the humans had just submitted a proposal to streamline the proposal submission process through 40 different departments simultaneously. "But why 40? Zix asked, genuinely curious. "Oh, we could have done more," Sarah admitted. "But we figured we should start small. You know, ease you all into it." Zix's color shifted to what Sarah had learned was their species' equivalent of laughter. "The Confederation has existed for 50,000 cycles. We've encountered millions of species, developed technologies your people can barely comprehend, and created the most comprehensive regulatory system in known space. And you call this starting small? Well, we haven't even shown you rock and roll yet." The conference dissolved into complete disorder when someone realized that several dozen species had jointly filed a petition to create a new department specifically for handling multiple simultaneous departmental submissions. The petition, naturally, had been submitted through every existing department. First speaker Anxithalax's voice cut through the chaos. "This is unprecedented. The regulatory system cannot function if everyone starts using it correctly." The chamber fell silent as everyone processed the inherent contradiction in that statement. "You know what the really funny part is?" Sarah said to Zix as they watched the Confederation's most powerful beings realize the paradox they'd created. "We're not even trying to break your system. We're just approaching it with fresh eyes and a willingness to explore possibilities. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical capabilities. It's our ability to look at something and ask, what if?" Zix's tendrils curled thoughtfully. "I just submitted a request to create an improvisational music research division through 5 different departments." "Only 5?" Sarah teased. "I'm still learning," Zix replied. "But I'm beginning to understand why your species has been giving our bureaucrats such wonderful headaches. You're not fighting the system, you're embracing it to death." Below them, the conference had broken into smaller discussion groups, with younger species representatives eagerly sharing notes while the elder races tried desperately to maintain order. Change was coming to the Confederation, one creatively filed form at a time. The Great Reorganization. The Confederation's Central Archive, a massive structure that housed 50 millennia of regulatory documentation, was experiencing something entirely new: spontaneous reorganization. The usually quiet halls were filled with the sound of robotic archivists zipping back and forth, reclassifying documents according to multiple simultaneous organizational systems. High Archivist Keth Plural watched in dismay as centuries of careful organization transformed into what the humans called dynamic categorization. Their assistant, Rem, seemed far too excited about the whole thing. "Look at this, High Archivist," Rem exclaimed, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with enthusiasm. "The humans have shown us how to cross-reference regulations across departments. We've discovered connections that have been hidden for millennia." Hidden. Keth Plural's sensory fronds wilted. They weren't hidden. They were properly filed in their designated locations. Exactly. But now we can see how they interact with each other. Did you know that the regulations for interstellar trade have underlying patterns similar to those in artistic expression protocols? The humans call it emergent complexity. Before Keth Plural could express their horror at this comparison, a priority message flashed across the archive's main display. The Conference of Elder Species had called an emergency session, the third one this week. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in every Confederation institution. The rigid structures that had maintained order for 50,000 years were not breaking down. They were evolving. In the Confederation Academy of Sciences, Professor Linux was giving a lecture that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. The human concept of trial and error initially appears to violate all established principles of scientific methodology, they explained to a packed auditorium. However, when combined with our traditional analytical frameworks, it creates a hybrid approach that is proving to be. They paused, using a recently learned human term, revolutionary. Students from 100 different species took notes, many using multiple devices simultaneously, a human habit that had spread like a virus through the younger generations. In the back of the room, a group of quantum mathematics students were playing what they called theoretical jazz, attempting to translate the principles of human musical improvisation into mathematical formulas. Meanwhile, in the Confederation's commercial district, a young Ventrusian named Spal had become the talk of the sector after opening what they called a regulatory consulting startup. Their slogan, "Finding Your Forms," had sparked a trend of businesses specifically dedicated to helping other species navigate the bureaucracy in creative ways. The Confederation's Department of Commercial Oversight was still trying to determine which forms were needed to regulate businesses that helped with forms. On Earth, the United Earth Government's Extraterrestrial Relations Office had evolved into something unprecedented. The original office, drowning in paperwork, had spawned dozens of specialized divisions, each finding new ways to interface with Confederation bureaucracy. Maya Patel, now Director of Administrative Innovation, was giving a presentation to a mixed audience of human and alien officials. "The key," she explained, "isn't to fight the system or even to change it directly. The key is to embrace it so thoroughly that it has no choice but to adapt. Every regulation creates opportunities. Every procedure opens new possibilities. The Confederation built the most complex administrative system in the galaxy. We're just helping it reach its full potential." In the audience, representatives from younger Confederation species took notes eagerly, while the elder race's representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, a crystalline elder, raised an appendage. "But this is causing unprecedented disruption. Just yesterday, the Department of Temporal Affairs received a proposal to regulate the speed of bureaucratic processes relative to different species' perception of time. The same proposal was simultaneously filed as a physics research paper, a philosophical inquiry, and a request for new chronological measurement standards." Maya beamed. "Fascinating approach. The cross-disciplinary implications alone. It was filed by one of our own departments. The elder interrupted. The infection of human thinking is spreading. We prefer to call it collaborative innovation, Maya replied smoothly. And speaking of collaboration, wait until you see our proposal for interdepartmental poetry slams. The elder's crystalline structure vibrated in alarm. Interdepartmental poetry. Oh yes, we found that artistic expression can significantly enhance administrative efficiency. We're calling it the Administrative Arts Initiative. The proposal has been filed through the Department of Cultural Affairs, the Bureau of Efficiency Standards, and the Committee for Linguistic Preservation. Also, we submitted it as an interpretive dance to the Council of Ceremonial Procedures. As the elder processed this information, their crystal lattice producing small distressed chiming sounds, Maya continued cheerfully, "Did you know that some of your younger archivists have started organizing documents according to their aesthetic qualities as well as their content? They're calling it bureaucratic feng shui." The revolution wasn't just spreading. It was mutating, evolving, taking on forms that even the humans hadn't anticipated. Species that had followed the same patterns for thousands of years were discovering the joy of asking, what if? The Confederation's perfect order wasn't dissolving into chaos. It was transforming into something new, a system that could grow, adapt, and even play jazz. A new order. One standard galactic year after humanity's first encounter with the Confederation, the Grand Chamber of Universal Regulation was hosting an event unprecedented in its 50,000-year history, an improvisational policy conference. First speaker Anxithalax, their crystalline ridges now deliberately arranged in an asymmetrical pattern that would have been unthinkable a year ago, addressed the assembled representatives of 10,000 species. When the humans first violated our border protocols, they began, we expected to simply process their infraction and restore order. Instead, they processed us. A ripple of multi-species laughter moved through the chamber. They showed us that our greatest strength, our system of universal regulation, had become our greatest limitation. In the gallery, Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth ship Curiosity sat beside Dr. Sarah Martinez, watching the proceedings with a mix of pride and amazement. "Did you ever think our bureaucratic nightmare would lead to this?" she whispered. Sarah smiled, remembering that first encounter. "Actually, I had a feeling. The moment we realized they were following their patrol patterns exactly as written in their manuals, I knew we'd found their weakness. Perfect order." Below, Anxithalax continued, "The Confederation was created to bring stability to a chaotic galaxy. We succeeded beyond our wildest expectations, and then we stopped expecting anything wild at all. We forgot that the universe itself thrives on a balance between order and chaos, pattern and possibility." The massive holographic displays showed scenes from across Confederation space. Young Contrusian entrepreneurs establishing regulatory innovation consultancies, crystalline scholars incorporating jazz principles into their mathematical models, and even the traditionally rigid archivists creating new dynamic classification systems that could evolve with use. "The humans taught us something we had forgotten," Anxithalax said. "They showed us that true stability doesn't come from eliminating uncertainty, but from learning to adapt to it. They didn't break our rules. They showed us new ways to follow them." In the diplomatic section, Maya Patel, now the head of Earth's Galactic Relations Department, was already drafting proposals on her datapad, in 7 different organizational styles simultaneously. Beside her, her alien counterpart Zix was composing what they called a regulatory symphony, a new art form that expressed bureaucratic processes through mathematics and music. "The Confederation hereby announces the creation of a new governing principle," Anxithalax declared. "The Adaptive Protocol Initiative. All species will be encouraged to explore new applications of existing regulations, foster creative approaches to administrative challenges, and," they paused dramatically, "improvise within established frameworks." The chamber erupted in a chaos of reactions. Cheers from the younger species, harmonic hums of approval from the crystallines, and even some of the elder race's representatives showing signs of cautious excitement. Furthermore, HFY continued, in recognition of their contribution to galactic civilization, humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Confederation, with a special dispensation to maintain their innovative compliance approaches. They created a whole new classification just for us, Sarah mused, because they couldn't figure out how to file us under existing categories. And now everyone wants to be filed in multiple categories, Alina added with a grin. In the years that followed, the galaxy experienced what historians would later call the Great Administrative Renaissance. The Confederation's vast bureaucracy didn't disappear. Instead, it evolved into something more flexible, more alive. Species that had been stagnant for millennia began to rediscover their creativity, finding ways to blend structure and spontaneity. The humans, for their part, continued to push boundaries in ways that both terrified and fascinated their galactic neighbors. They introduced concepts like regulatory hackathons, bureaucratic improvisation workshops, and something they called extreme filing that became an inexplicably popular sport among younger aliens. But perhaps the most profound change was invisible to most observers. In teaching the galaxy how to bend without breaking, humanity had helped create something unprecedented. A civilization that could maintain order while embracing change, that could follow rules while questioning them, that could dance between chaos and structure like a master of jazz. As the ceremony concluded, first speaker HFY made one final announcement. The Confederation's official archive will now include a new section dedicated to questions we haven't thought to ask yet. The humans have volunteered to help us fill it. In the gallery, Alina turned to Sarah. You know what this means, don't you? Sarah nodded. We've officially made bureaucracy fun. Probably the greatest achievement in human history. Just wait until they discover rock and roll accounting. Across the chamber, 10,000 species began filing out, some following traditional exit protocols, others trying new paths, and a brave few attempting to leave through multiple exits simultaneously, just to see what would happen. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, as humanity had shown them, was exactly how things should be.